Many people believe they are thinking when in reality they are merely reacting. Thought is not simply the voice in your head, nor the endless stream of opinions and judgments. Most people mistake speed of judgment for clarity of thought. Something happens, and immediately the mind rushes to label it good or bad, success or failure, friend or enemy. But this automatic labeling is not true thinking. It is reaction. It is the mind operating on old habits, like a machine running a program it didn't choose. To think correctly, the first step is to learn how to observe without rushing to judge. When you simply watch what is happening both around you and inside you without adding any meaning yet, you create space. In that space, truth can reveal itself. A person who always judges quickly lives in a world of assumptions. But a person who trains to observe lives in a world of understanding. This is not easy. The mind is restless. It wants to classify everything so it can feel safe and in control. But safety bought through instant judgment is false. You end up seeing only what you expect to see, not what is really there. Think about a time when you misjudged someone because of a first impression, only to later discover you were wrong. That happens because you did not observe long enough. Observation means looking without the filter of desire or fear. If someone criticizes you, do you instantly feel attacked? If you fail at something, do you immediately label it as useless? Try instead to watch what is actually happening in this moment. What is the fact, not the story you attach to it? By slowing down the impulse to judge, you give your mind a chance to see with clarity. And clarity is the root of correct thinking. Your thoughts are not entirely your own. This is something most people never stop to realize. From the moment you were born, ideas have been flowing into your mind from countless sources: family, friends, culture, education, media, and experiences you did not choose. Every opinion you carry, every belief you defend, and even many of your desires have roots in something you may not fully understand. If you believe your thinking is purely independent, it is often because you have never taken the time to trace its origins. The mind is like a garden. Seeds are constantly falling into it, some intentionally planted, others scattered by the wind. These seeds grow into thoughts, opinions, and automatic reactions. But have you ever asked, who planted these seeds? Which of them are weeds and which are nourishing plants? If you never examine this, you may spend your whole life defending thoughts that were never really yours. Consider how quickly people adopt the views of those around them. A child raised in one culture grows up believing certain things are absolutely true. Another child in a different culture grows up believing the opposite with equal certainty. If both children are convinced they are thinking for themselves, can that really be correct? This shows how deeply the environment shapes the mind without awareness. You are not thinking, you are being thought. To think correctly, you must begin by questioning the source of your thoughts. The next time you feel strongly about something, anger, fear, excitement, or desire, pause and ask, where does this come from? Is this truly my voice, or did I inherit it from someone else? Did I examine it myself, or did I simply accept it because it was comfortable? This simple inquiry starts to break the invisible chains of conditioning. Sometimes people fear this kind of questioning. They worry that if they examine everything, they will lose their identity. But the opposite is true. When you investigate where your thoughts come from, you do not lose yourself. You begin to meet yourself for the first time. You strip away what is false, what is borrowed, what is blindly absorbed. What remains is original, authentic, and alive. Let's take an example. Imagine someone who believes they must always win, in order to feel worthy. Where does that thought come from? Maybe it was a message absorbed in childhood, where love and approval seemed to depend on achievement. Maybe it came from society, where status and competition are constantly glorified. If this person never questions that thought, they live in constant anxiety, chasing success to avoid feeling worthless. But if they trace the root of that belief, they can finally see this is not an eternal truth. This is just conditioning. And when they see it clearly, they gain freedom to think differently. Understanding the source of your thoughts also helps you avoid manipulation. The world is full of people and systems trying to tell you what to think. Advertisers, politicians, even friends with good intentions. When you know how to ask, where did this idea come from? You stop being so easily controlled. You can listen without absorbing. You can learn without becoming lost. This kind of awareness requires patience and honesty. It means being willing to look at your own mind as if it were an open book, without pride, without fear. You may discover things you do not like, prejudices, fears, selfish motives, but do not turn away. Every time you understand the source of a thought, you weaken its unconscious grip over you. Little by little, you stop being a prisoner of inherited thinking and start becoming the author of your own mind. There is an important distinction between knowledge and wisdom, but many people confuse the two. Knowledge is information, facts, figures, techniques, theories. It can be collected endlessly, like books on a shelf. Wisdom, however, is understanding. An insight that penetrates beneath the surface of information and allows you to use it correctly. A person may have libraries of knowledge yet still live without clarity, while another with far less information may act with profound wisdom in every moment. In our world, knowledge is praised because it is visible, measurable, and easy to display. Degrees, titles, and certificates tell others that you have learned something. But wisdom is silent, subtle, and inward. It cannot be measured with a test. You cannot simply point to it and say, "Look how wise I am." True wisdom is recognized through how you live, how you treat people, how you respond when life challenges you. Thinking correctly is not about cramming more information into your head. It is about learning to see clearly and apply what you already know in a way that aligns with truth and balance. Many people know what is right but fail to do it, because knowledge sits in the mind like words on paper, while wisdom sinks into the heart and becomes part of your very being. Imagine someone who has read countless books about health, exercise, and nutrition. They can talk for hours about the science of fitness, but they never actually train their body or care for themselves. This is knowledge without wisdom. Now imagine someone who knows only a little about fitness, but practices every day, listens to their body, and adapts with awareness. That person may be less knowledgeable in theory, but far wiser in practice. Wisdom arises when you digest knowledge rather than simply store it. It is the difference between memorizing a recipe and actually cooking a meal that nourishes you. Information that is not lived remains hollow. It has no power to transform you. But when you live what you learn, the information becomes alive and it shapes you in ways no book or lecture ever could. The pursuit of knowledge alone can even become dangerous. A clever person with no wisdom can use information to manipulate, deceive, or harm. They may learn how to control others or achieve personal gain, yet lack the understanding to see the consequences of their actions. History is full of brilliant minds who lack wisdom and therefore use their intelligence destructively. True thinking is not simply about being clever, it is about being clear, balanced, and guided by a deeper sense of rightness. Wisdom also requires humility. The more you know, the easier it is to become proud, to think you have all the answers. But wisdom knows its own limits. A wise person understands that life is vast and mysterious, and that no amount of information can capture the whole truth. This humility keeps the mind open. When your mind is open, you continue to learn not just from books and teachers, but from every experience, every conversation, every mistake. Thinking correctly means using knowledge as a tool rather than letting it become an ornament for the ego. The purpose of learning is not to impress others or feel superior. The purpose is to illuminate life, to guide action, and to bring clarity where there is confusion. If knowledge does not lead to better choices, deeper understanding, and greater compassion, it remains incomplete. Consider how children often act with a kind of natural wisdom, even though they know very little. They approach life with curiosity, honesty, and a lack of pretense. They do not need to pretend they know everything. They simply ask, explore, and learn. As adults, we often lose that simplicity. We collect information as if it could protect us, but we forget to live with the openness and clarity that make wisdom possible. To think correctly, you must ask yourself, not just what do I know, but how do I live? What I know. Knowledge can fill your mind, but wisdom transforms your character. Knowledge is something you carry. Wisdom carries you. Knowledge can make you seem intelligent, but wisdom makes you truly alive. When you cultivate wisdom, every decision, every action, and every relationship becomes a reflection of deeper understanding rather than a performance of what you have memorized. When emotions are strong, the mind becomes clouded. Anger, fear, jealousy, excitement, and even excessive desire can distort the way you see reality. In such moments, it feels as though you are thinking clearly, but what you are actually doing is reacting from a place of imbalance. The first step to thinking correctly is to recognize how emotion can dominate thought and how essential it is to let the waters of the mind settle before deciding anything important. A calm lake reflects the world around it with perfect clarity. A lake that has been stirred up by wind or stones shows only broken images. The surface is restless, and you cannot see what lies beneath. The mind works in the same way. When disturbed by intense emotion, it shows you a distorted version of reality, not reality itself. You may believe you are being rational, but really you are being driven by an inner storm. Consider the way anger works. When anger arises, the mind immediately seeks an enemy. It clings to blame. Every thought becomes sharp, every judgment absolute. You convince yourself that your anger is justified, that it shows strength. But afterward, when the emotion passes, you often regret what you said or did. This reveals that it was not true clarity guiding you. It was raw energy pushing you to act without reflection. Fear operates in a similar way. When fear takes over, your world becomes narrow. You see danger everywhere. Options that were open before now seem closed. Your mind exaggerates threats and minimizes opportunities. If you make decisions in that state, they will almost always come from a place of avoidance rather than understanding. Fear tells you to run even when there is nowhere to run. Even excitement, which feels pleasant, can distort your judgment. When you are overly eager, you overlook warning signs. You ignore details you would normally pay attention to. Desire blinds you to risk. You convince yourself that you are thinking positively, but in reality you are refusing to see the full picture because it does not match what you want. To think correctly, you must develop the ability to pause between emotion and decision. This does not mean you suppress your feelings or pretend you are unaffected. It means you acknowledge what you feel, but do not let it lead you blindly. A trained mind is one that can experience emotion fully, yet still wait for clarity before acting. Breathing is one of the simplest tools for this. When emotion surges, notice your breath. It becomes shallow, fast, uneven. By deliberately slowing it down, you send a signal to your entire system that there is no immediate danger, that you have time to think. Just a few moments of stillness can change the quality of your decisions completely. Another practice is to observe your emotions as if they belong to someone else. Instead of saying, "I am angry," try to see it as anger is arising. This small shift in language reminds you that feelings are temporary visitors, not permanent masters. When you create a little distance between yourself and your emotions, they lose their power to control you. Life constantly presents situations where this skill is tested. Someone criticizes you unfairly. Do you instantly retaliate, or do you breathe and respond with calm strength? A tempting opportunity appears. Do you rush toward it without thought, or do you slow down to consider its consequences? A crisis hits unexpectedly. Do you panic, or do you wait for your mind to settle so you can see the best path forward? Training the mind to think beyond emotion is not something that happens once. It is a lifelong discipline. Every moment of awareness strengthens it. The more you practice, the more natural it becomes. You begin to notice emotions rising early, before they fully take hold, and you learn to ride their waves without being swept away. Eventually, your thoughts stop being reactive and start being deliberate, calm, and precise. This does not make you cold or detached. On the contrary, it allows you to feel more deeply without being imprisoned by your feelings. You gain the freedom to choose your response rather than be enslaved by impulse. And in that freedom, the mind sees clearly again, just like a still lake reflecting the world exactly as it is. Situations are always changing, yet most people build their thinking on shifting ground. When life is calm, they think one way. When it becomes difficult, they think another. Their decisions are shaped entirely by circumstances, and because circumstances are unpredictable, their thinking is unstable. To think correctly, the mind must be guided not by passing events, but by principles that remain constant no matter what happens. Principles are like a compass. They do not change direction just because the weather does. If you have no compass, every time the sky grows dark, you will feel lost. You may wander in circles, chasing short-term solutions and abandoning your deeper values. But when your thinking is rooted in principles such as honesty, discipline, patience, and compassion, you can navigate through any storm without losing yourself. Consider how people often act when pressured by fear or temptation. A person might value integrity in words, but when an opportunity appears to gain quick profit by bending the truth, they abandon their values in the moment it seems practical. Later, they feel regret or find themselves trapped by the consequences. Why does this happen? Because their thinking was based on the situation, not on principle. Correct thinking means you do not betray your foundation simply because the circumstances have shifted. Principles give clarity because they simplify decisions. If you have already decided that you will always speak the truth, you do not need to agonize every time you are tempted to lie. If you live by the principle of compassion, you will not wonder whether to help someone in need. You will simply look for the best way to do so. Principles act like guardrails on a road, keeping you from drifting into danger even when visibility is low. This does not mean principles are rigid rules that ignore reality. It means they are steady reference points. When situations are complex, principles guide you back to what matters most. For example, imagine you are leading a team and must make a difficult decision that will disappoint some people. If you think only in terms of immediate results, you may choose the path that pleases the loudest voices. But if you think in terms of fairness and long-term growth, you make the decision that aligns with principle, even if it is unpopular in the moment. Another way to understand this is to look at how nature works. A tree has roots that hold it firm. The wind can blow from any direction, but the tree does not panic or twist itself to please the wind. If the roots are shallow, the tree falls. If the roots are deep, the tree can bend without breaking. Your principles are your roots. They hold you steady so you can adapt to circumstances without being controlled by them. Building a life on principles requires awareness and courage. Awareness, because you must first recognize what your true principles are, not what others say they should be, but what feels deeply right to you. Courage, because living by principle is not always easy. It often means resisting pressure, temptation, or the approval of others. But it is precisely in those moments of difficulty that your principles reveal their power. Correct thinking does not look for what is convenient. It looks for what is right and consistent with your core values. When you live this way, you gain something rare: trust in yourself. You no longer have to second-guess every choice because you know your decisions are rooted in something solid. Even when outcomes are uncertain, you can stand firm because you are guided by an inner compass rather than external noise. Situations will always try to pull you in different directions: success and failure, praise and criticism, comfort and pain. If you think only in terms of the present moment, you will constantly change course, never knowing who you really are. But if you think in terms of principle, you discover a steadiness that nothing outside you can shake. Your actions become aligned, your decisions clear, and your path consistent, no matter what life brings. Thinking is not something that happens only in the mind. Real thinking is shaped and refined through action. Many people imagine they can become clear, disciplined thinkers by reading more books, listening to more speeches, or collecting clever ideas. But correct thinking is not a theory you memorize. It is a skill you train, just like the body must be trained through movement rather than by studying anatomy diagrams. When you only think about thinking, your ideas remain abstract. They are fragile, untested. They may sound wise, but they have no weight because they have never been put to use. Just as a sword must be tempered in fire to become strong, the mind must be tempered in the fire of experience. Action is that fire. It tests your ideas, exposes your illusions, and shows you what truly works. Imagine someone who reads everything about patience but loses their temper whenever life does not go their way. They may understand patience as a concept, but they do not live it. Their thinking is still reactive, not trained. Now imagine someone who deliberately practices patience every day, waiting calmly in traffic, listening fully to people they disagree with, enduring discomfort without complaint. Through repeated action, patience becomes part of who they are. Their thinking changes because they have embodied the principle rather than simply studied it. Correct thinking grows from small, deliberate choices repeated over time. You learn how to think not by endlessly planning, but by doing, observing, and adjusting. When you take action, you receive feedback from reality. That feedback sharpens your understanding. You discover that some of your assumptions were wrong, some of your expectations unrealistic, and some of your fears unfounded. Each lesson refines your judgment and builds a mind that is both flexible and resilient. The action also reveals the gap between what you say and what you actually do. It is easy to believe you are disciplined until you put yourself in situations that require discipline. It is easy to believe you are courageous until fear appears and demands a response. Only when you act do you discover the true quality of your thinking, and only through repeated effort does that quality improve. This is why training the mind requires consistent practice. Whether it is meditation, martial arts, study, or any skill, the process is the same. You try, you make mistakes, you learn, and you try again. Over time, these repeated actions rewire the way you perceive challenges. What once made you panic now feels manageable. What once confused you now seems clear. Your thinking becomes less like scattered clouds and more like open sky. Even small actions matter. Choosing to rise early rather than sleep in, keeping a promise when it is inconvenient, finishing a task instead of abandoning it halfway. These are not just habits, they are exercises for the mind. They teach you to see beyond comfort and impulse, to guide your decisions with awareness rather than emotion. Every small discipline strengthens the clarity of your thoughts, just as every small neglect allows confusion to creep back in. It is important to remember that action without reflection is just motion, but reflection without action is just imagination. The two must work together. When you try something and it fails, do not become discouraged. Look closely. What does the failure teach you? Where was your thinking? Unclear. What assumption needs to change? This cycle of action, reflection, and refinement is what builds a mind that sees accurately and responds wisely. Correct thinking does not arrive suddenly as a gift. It is forged by living deliberately, by testing your ideas in the real world, by staying committed even when progress feels slow. Over time, this practice develops a quiet confidence. You no longer need to guess whether your thoughts are clear. You know they are, because they have been shaped and strengthened by consistent application. When thinking and action are united in this way, your understanding becomes unshakable and your decisions become naturally precise. Correct thinking is not about filling your mind with more information. It is about learning to see clearly, to understand deeply, and to act without confusion. When you observe before you judge, you stop being a prisoner of assumptions. When you trace the roots of your thoughts, you free yourself from unconscious conditioning. When you distinguish wisdom from mere knowledge, your decisions gain weight and meaning. When you calm the storms of emotion, your mind reflects reality as it is, not as fear or desire would have you see it. When you anchor yourself in principles rather than shifting circumstances, your path remains steady even when life changes direction. And when you train your thinking through deliberate action, clarity stops being an idea and becomes your natural way of living. The purpose of these teachings is not to tell you what to think, but to awaken in you the ability to think correctly on your own. A clear mind is not given by others. It is built within you, step by step, choice by choice. When you walk this path with patience and discipline, you no longer need constant guidance. You carry your own compass, and wherever you go, you are never lost.